All right. Are you ready, girlfriends? All right, let's do this. I want you to know at the very beginning how grateful I am that you are here. I believe it requires great courage and brave hearts to walk into this room, because wouldn't we all agree that walking the road of grief is very difficult? Nod at me if you agree with that. It is very, very difficult. I know some of your stories, and I know how hard some of them are. And I don't know some of your stories, but I know that we believe they're hard. But whatever path you are on, we believe that no matter what road you are walking, that all roads are best when they're done arm in arm beside other people. We are not wired to be in isolation. All roads are best when they are done beside other people, walking arm in arm. None of us, not one of us in this room would choose to walk the road we are walking. But here we are, we're on a road we didn't choose, and we want to do it to the best of our ability, to the best that we possibly can. Do you agree with that? And so I want to find out who's here. Talk to me for just a moment. Just raise your hands. Pick the grief that you are dealing with right now. I know some of you are dealing with multiple griefs, but in the grief that you're walking on right now, how many of you, this is your very first holiday season in the road of grief? Okay, so a couple of you. How many of you are you grieving the death of a parent? Okay, how many of you are grieving the death of a child? Okay, how many of you are grieving the death of a spouse? Okay, just wanted you to know, wanted to know what we're dealing with in the room. I've written 3 purpose statements, and they'll be on the PowerPoint, 3 purpose statements for our time together tonight. And everything that we're doing and everything that I've written are going to point to these 3 purposes. Number 1, I want this time together to provide for us emotional, physical, and spiritual support in a safe and non-judgmental space. And so what that means is I would love it right now if you would take a vow with me, a vow of confidentiality, that everything shared at your table or in this room would not leave this room or go outside of this room. That we have a place that we can be safe, that we have a place that we can even just a little bit open our hearts, and that we know that we will not be judged, and that we have a space that we can trust, And there's not a lot of those spaces, true? Not a lot of those spaces, but we want to be emotionally, physically, and spiritually safe. Number 2, purpose. We want to explore ways that we can develop self-compassion. Self-compassion is a new phrase for me, and I'm using it a lot. Self-compassion is when we learn, when we explore, when we even begin to discover how to be soft with ourselves, how to show ourselves compassion. See if you agree with this. A lot of us are really mean to ourselves in our own head. We say things to ourselves that we would never, ever, ever say to another person. Do you agree with that? And in the road of grief, we can't do that. We've got to show up and be kind to us, and we're going to explore that. We're going to take that apart some in just a minute. Number 3, silence the sense of isolation. One of our strong purposes here is to silence the sense of isolation we may be experiencing in our death-denying and grief-defying culture. Don't we do that? Don't we live in a culture that resists even the talk of death? We don't know what to do when people grieve. And so frequently what we find is we shut each other down. If I don't know what to do, if I don't know how to handle your pain, I just shut you down, typically with things that don't even make sense and may be very hurtful. But in this space, we want to silence that sense of isolation. How many of us, you don't have to raise your hand with this, but how many of us on the road of grief think, it's just me? I am the only one. It is just me with this thought. And what we have found is in grief, when we get really, really brave and we begin to open our heart, somebody else says, if not a lot of somebody say, me too. I feel that too. I felt the exact same thing because walking the road of grief, can I tell you, when I first started on the journey, I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was going crazy until somebody else said, me too. I feel that too. So those are our purposes tonight. Provide safety, explore ways of self-compassion, and to help us see that we're part of a group, that we are part of a group. Silence the sense of isolation. Silence the sense of isolation. Some of you know my story and some of you don't. My story began in 2010. February 4th of 2010, my 31-year-old daughter, firstborn, only daughter, Jenny, went into the hospital with what we thought originally was the flu. That's what she had been diagnosed with. After a few hours of being in isolation in the hospital, we found out she never had the flu at all, but what Jenny had was group A strep. She was septic. Within 12 hours, really probably within 6 hours, they had to put her on a vent. And so I never heard her voice again. That was February 4th. February 8th, Jenny almost died 3 times. We were very, very, very ill. Let's see, February 17th, they amputated her legs. Group A strep had led to septic shock. February 20th, the infection had crossed the blood-brain barrier and seizures had started. And on February 22nd, we told our 31-year-old daughter goodbye as we believe the angels swooped in and took her to safety. I taught grief workshops, gut level truth, all over the world. I taught grief workshops in Africa. And I remember leaving the hospital that day thinking, I did not felt like this. I had no idea it felt like this. As we were leaving to go tell a 9-year-old that her mommy had died, I just remember thinking, I cannot believe this is the path I've been called to walk. And in this room, we all have a story. We have stories. Yesterday, my husband was speaking in Abilene, and I was there with him. We were going to end his sermon with a little grief workshop that we were going to speak at together. And Rick told our story in his sermon, and one of my friends leaned over and asked me, does it get easy to hear this story? I said, it doesn't get easier, but somehow it blesses me when I get to tell it. When I'm telling it to you and I'm looking in your eyes and you are receiving my story and you're even looking at me like you understand my pain, because I am, maybe it's what I do professionally, I don't know, but I have a gift of being able to read people's eyes. And when I'm looking into some people's eyes, I see immediately the look in their eyes of, I cannot bear your pain. I don't know what to do with your pain. And that makes me shut down. But in this space, this night, I want you to know. And if we were at lunch together, I would be holding your hands, each one of you, and telling you, I want to hear your story. I want to hear your story. So tonight, there is no forced share. You do not have to share. But what I would like to give you space to do right now is share your story at your table. Just at your table. Some of you know your stories, but I want you to share it again if you want to. I want you to have a space. You may want to share some details. You may not want to share all the details. But I want you to have a place tonight, a sense of safety that you can share your story. Now, it is 7:15, and I've got probably 3 hours worth of information. I'm kidding. 3 hours worth of information to share is what I was going to say. Let's take just a few minutes. I'm not going to put a time on us, but let's take just a few minutes. If you would be aware of time, space, which means kind of look at how many people are in your group, just be aware of time, space, and take 2 or 3 minutes and just share your story at your table. And you can start that right now. One of the things I want you to do with your story is I want you to share your grief symptoms. I want you to look at this page and I want you to share some of the things that stood out to you. I told you my story was February 2010. I still find myself sighing a lot. Sighing is definitely a symptom of grief. We sigh. We just take in air differently. We're trying to calm our spirits. Sighing. So I want you to tell your story and share this, and we're going to take just a few moments to do that. Okay, I think everybody's done. Now, I'd like just some feedback from you for a moment. What was that like for you? Give me 2 or 3 words. What was it like for you just to share your story, or what was it like for you to hear another story? Comforting? That was your word too? Okay, yes? Any other word?
You feel understood, I think.
Feel understood. Somebody heard. Somebody gets it. Yeah.
They know what you're feeling.
They know what you're feeling. They identify. They can, me too. So, yes? Sympathize. Okay.
Free.
Uh-huh.
Free.
Free. Help me with that, because that's my word too. What feels freeing about it?
When you can let some of this out.
Yes. Isn't it really hard work to stuff it in, just to close up your heart when you're with someone who doesn't get it? And we don't feel like we have a place to talk about it, so we close it. And then tonight, when you get to even open it that's all we really did, is open it just a little. And it does feel so freeing for somebody to be able to look at you and say, me too, I get it. And did you notice how our paths are so much, as you said, the same, but every story was so different? Every story is so different too. So we're walking a road of sameness, but with difference too. We all have our own unique grief journey. Truth? And somebody once said, only you can walk your own grief journey, but you do not have to do it alone. Only you can walk the road you've been called to walk, but you don't have to walk it alone. We walk it beside other people. And for some of us that have tried to stuff that pain or close that pain or not be able to talk about that pain, an event like this can just make you want to do that really big sigh that, oh, somebody heard my heart. Somebody heard a piece of my heart. Now let's talk about, because the specific nature of this grief workshop, unlike doing one in February or March, April, September, we're talking specifically here about the holidays. So I want to get this part. I want to journey this one at the beginning. So as we talk about some other components with grief, we can use the holidays as our touchstone. Okay? What is it? Now explore this with me. What is it that makes the holidays harder than other days? Brainstorm that with me. What is it that makes the holidays harder than other days? And maybe not just, I don't want you to misunderstand, maybe not just December 25th. For me, the holidays were hard from the moment in 2010 I woke up and it was November 1st, because I knew the holidays were coming. They were coming.
You know, and you just realize they're coming, and
Yes.
it starts.
You just know it, the holidays are coming, your thoughts are there, okay? What else do we have? Any? Okay, family. Sometimes family is comforting. Sometimes family, maybe your person that died was your safe person when you were with your family. Sometimes families aren't so comforting to be with. Somebody say truth, you can whisper that one. Not this table, because they're all family. But you know what I'm talking about. What else makes the holidays hard?
We don't want it to be different than it's always been.
We don't want it to be...
Good memories.
Yes, we don't want it to be different than it's always been. We have memories of how it's been. We don't want it to be different. It's going to be different. What else?
They're supposed to be happy and perfect.
They're supposed to be happy and perfect. We're looking for that. We watch all the Christmas movies. They're already cranking up, and I love Christmas movies. But they all end happy. And I knew my holidays, particularly in 2010 and everyone since, it wasn't going to end all happy. What else? Do you have anything else with that?
Well, we, at this table, to compound the holidays, it's our anniversary.
Ah, so for this group that all lost a spouse, not only is it the holidays, but it's your anniversaries. Okay, I'm repeating this just for the tape, okay, so people can...
Period or something, all of us.
Say it again?
It's like a 2-week period.
Okay, 2-week period. Holidays are important times when people get married. What about this, girlfriends? What about this? That frequently the holidays are so hard, not just because of the death, but because of what we call the secondary losses. Are you familiar with what a secondary loss is? For me with Jenny, I'm just going to brainstorm. For me with Jenny, I lost my shopping companion. Jenny was the one that went shopping with me. She's the one that would walk for hours with me. I lost the one that would help me plan the holidays. What do you think about this meal? And what do you think about this meal? And what should we do here? And how do you want to do Christmas? And how should we do Santa? And all that, all taking that apart. She helped me plan it. Even my own insecurities, I could talk to her about. My own insecurities about the holidays. For me, no, this is just me, okay? But as a mother-in-law, as a grandmother, Christmas morning can be a whole lot of pressure for me. Thinking, are they going to like it? Are they going to like the gift? Are my daughters-in-law, are they going to like the gift? Is my son-in-law going to? Because I don't know them. I didn't know them that well during that season. Now I know them better. But Jenny was the one helping me kind of deal with some of those insecurities with that. Also, just the gatherings, the holiday gatherings, there is what now for us? An empty chair. There's an empty chair there as people gather. There's one person that you really loved, that the empty chair is there. Walking in stores, see if you agree with this one. And for those of you that it's your first season, you may not have this yet. Well, I think you probably have, just at other times. Walking in stores and feeling so anonymous. Anybody there? Walking in stores and thinking, I think I may have to leave. I remember walking in Walmart and hearing laughter and thinking, do they not know? Do they not know what's happened in my life? Do I just need to turn around? I just felt so anonymous in crowds. Feeling like when I was sitting with my family sometimes, feeling like it was almost an out-of-body experience. That the laughter is going on around me, but I couldn't find it in my own gut. Are you with me? Do you do a me too with that? What does it look like and what does it sound like? So what I want to do with you right now, and we're using the holidays as our touchstone. Okay, we're going to keep going back. But this is one of those moments that I want to be holding your hands as we explore, because what I want us to unpack for the next few moments is self-care. Now, at the very end, we'll do a Q&A. So you've got Post-it notes there, and as you think of a question, you just jot it down, okay? But I want to finish this part, and then I want us to open with Q&A. Let's talk about self-care. And PERS, P-E-R-S, is the acrostic that I use for self-care. And I have to tell you, I don't usually type it straight across. When I type it in notes when I'm speaking or whatever, I usually do it up and down like an acrostic. But for this workshop, I did it straight across. And do you know what my computer changed it to? Personal. And that's the first time I thought about that. What I'm about to tell you can only be taken care of by you. It can be encouraged by other people. But this is where I am going to beg you to give yourself permission for self-care. To give yourself permission for some self-compassion. So PERS, P-E-R-S is the acrostic. We're going to start with the P, and the P is physically. I had no idea how much grief hurt physically till I was in it. There were days that I hurt from the top of my head to the tips of my toes. There were days that it just centered in my heart. There were days that just centered in my gut. There were days that everything hurt. How many of you have experienced that? It hurts. It is painful. So how can we take care of ourselves physically? Now, what I want you to do right now, I want everybody to take one Post-it note. You've got Post-it notes all over everybody gets one. And on that page, on that Post-it note, I want you to write this phrase: I give myself permission to ... And I want you to write that throughout the holidays. I want you to pick, when I'm talking about all four of these, and right now we're looking at physically mostly, but I want you to take a moment to go, what is it that I need to give myself permission to do? Because we as women don't give ourselves much permission to do anything. I'm performing for other people. Do you know what I'm talking about? I want to make sure everybody else has a good holiday. But what do you do when that year you don't have the energy to do that? You give yourself permission to self-care. You give yourself permission to take care of you. You give yourself permission to catch air. And frequently when I do that, I do it right here because Jenny was trait at the end. So when I talk about grabbing air intentionally, I typically do, I grab air. I grab a breath. I give myself permission to. And so I want you, as you think about that, on another Post-it note, to write out things you need to give yourself permission to do. And one of those is sleep. I give myself permission to rest. I give myself permission to rest. I want to say right here, and I want to say this emphatically, because grief and depression are not the same. Somebody say truth. Grief is a natural response to a life loss. We are wired by God to grieve. Depression is a different animal. Depression is a brain chemistry, and depression is when we are not healthy. Now, I do believe, and that's why I do events like this, I do believe that when grief is not done, when we do what we talked about at the beginning, when we close it up and I don't allow myself to grieve and I don't give myself permission, frequently grieving people that don't learn how to grieve well become depressed. Do you understand what I'm talking about with that? Doesn't mean we can't circle back and do a touchstone again. Circle back and do a touchstone with grief. But grief not done well can become depression. And what I mean by that is this. There's some fairly new research the last couple of years, 2.5 years I think it is, that says this. We used to think that depressed people couldn't sleep. Now we believe that people who don't sleep can become depressed. And I believe we've got to train our bodies. I struggled with, after Jenny died, I was diagnosed with some PTSD because of the things our eyes had seen for those few days in the hospital. And I do believe that death can give us some glimpses of some PTSD, that over-adrenaline rush, hyped anxiety at the smallest of things. Woke up at 2:30, startled every morning for probably 18 months. But to train your body to go back to rest. Now, this is probably the only time that you will ever hear a counselor say this. And I'm not talking about prescription meds, and I'm certainly not talking about misusing meds. But I want to encourage you, when we're training our bodies to sleep, to maybe do an over-the-counter sleep aid like a Benadryl. I use Walmart brand Benadryl, and I do it every other night. And what I mean, the formula that I use is this. If I did not sleep last night, I'll take it tonight. If I don't sleep tonight, I'll take it tomorrow night. If I sleep tomorrow night, I won't take it the next night. Now raise your hand if you understood that one. But we're kind of trying to retrain our bodies how to rest, because grief just makes you go, and we don't sleep. Or we could go into hypersleep, and I want to deal with that one in just a moment. But give yourself permission to rest. To lay in bed and just practice resting, to keep a journal beside your bed. We'll talk more about that one in just a moment. Give yourself permission to eat. Our bodies can sometimes shut down in grief, and we don't eat healthily. And I want to talk more about that in just a moment. We give ourselves permission to eat. We give ourselves permission to drink water. Grieving people dehydrate, and that's not from the tears. It's just the biology. Doctors that study grief frequently tell us grieving people dehydrate. Want to drink lots of water. Grieving people need to give themselves permission to exercise. And that is not to lose weight. That is to deal with the anxiety. Exercise is a natural antidepressant, anti-anxiety from the mental health standpoint, and this is not from a physical standpoint. From a mental health standpoint, it says 35 minutes heart rate up every day. Now, from a physical standpoint, they say work out, 30 minutes, more days a week than not, meaning if you do 4 days, you got it. Grieving people, I needed to work out every day for a minimum of 35 minutes. It just could be a brisk walk. It could be crazy dancing. It can be anything that gets your heart rate up for a moment, because the anxiety is so heightened in us. But give yourself permission to self-care physically. One other thing about physical that I want to tell you, no, two other things about physical that I want to tell you. One I find fascinating, one I want to teach you. One of the fascinating things is that the tears of grief contain a different biology than any other tears. Now, is that not a wowzer? For those of us that ever question God, this is a moment that we go, how cool is that? The tears of grief contain toxins and have to be shed. My own grief counselor told me, give yourself permission to cry when you want to cry when you want to, because those tears need to be shed. Now, another thing I want us to talk about for just a moment is breathing. Breathing can be hard for us when we're in anxiety or when we're in the road of grief. Have you found that to be true? I did. I have recently learned a technique of grief that came from Navy SEALs and yoga instructors. And I love this formula for breathing, and it has helped me, and it's blessed some other people that I know, even people dealing with some anxiety. I'm talking about like emergency room types anxiety attacks, and it's called box breath. And I'm going to show it to you first, and then I'm going to model it for you, and then I want you to do it with me. It is 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds. So we breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Navy SEALs do this. They practice it when they are calm, so that when they are under fire, so that when the tension is on, they know how to calm their own anxiety. I wish so much I'd known this breathing technique my first set of holidays. Do it with me. Do it beside me. We're going to breathe in for 4. We're going to hold for 4. We're going to go out for 4. We're going to hold for 4. Do it again with me. In, hold, out, hold. Do you feel it? Do you feel your body start to relax? It's calming for us, and we can give ourselves permission to box breathe right before we're putting dinner on the table, and it's that moment. Because I did that before Jenny died, but nothing like I've done after. It's that moment we claim our breath. We remember, we claim our breathing. Straight from that, I want to go into the E, which is emotional. I give myself permission to take care of myself emotionally. I give myself permission to take care of myself emotionally. My own grief therapist told me this, and when you are a counselor, you are in counseling all the time. It's just usually over Olive Garden breadsticks or Joe T's chips and salsa. I mean, all the time. So I saw 3 different grief counselors. My first one told me I was being an overachiever at grief, and those of you that know me well will understand that one. I mean, he said, wow, you're trying to overachieve. Like, I just want to do it well. I mean, I just want to do it well because I've watched people, and I don't want to get depressed. I want to do it well. And he's like, you can calm down on that a bit. And then my next grief therapist told me this one: strength is way overrated. Give it up. Don't worry about being strong. Our grief responses are learned. Most of us can remember where we learned them from. Just so happened at my early family deaths, to one of my paternal grandmother, and I had an uncle that died when I was a little girl, and it just so happened during both of those deaths, I was with my maternal grandmother, who had buried her mom when she was 9. Now, how much I wished I'd ask her more questions, knowing that I have a granddaughter who's buried her mom when she was 9. I wish I knew more about that. But my grandmother's phrase to me was always, be strong. Be strong. Stop that stuff. Be strong. Because that was survival for my grandmother. Be strong. But that is not good survival for us. That makes us armor our hearts and close our hearts. And girlfriends, I don't get to pick. If I'm going to armor up, If I'm going to armor my heart, then it means I armor the good and the bad. Does that make sense to you? I can't pick and choose what I armor up. Give yourself permission to be where you are emotionally, particularly on the holidays. Give yourself permission to show up where you are on the holidays. Tears, absolutely. Journal like crazy. I'm an avid journaler, and I want you to be an avid journaler. Now, my oldest son has a major aversion to talking about throw up. And so every time I'm with him and I do this example, he's like, no, Mom, not the throw up story, but it works for me. Because I feel like it's like this. Sometimes, for me, my emotions just start churning, and they're churning, and they're churning, and I'm thinking, it reminds me of my stomach virus. How many of you have ever had a stomach virus? You know what I'm talking about. And you're just churning, and you're churning, and you're thinking, I just need to throw up. I just need to get this out. That's exactly what it feels like. I need to throw up. I need to get stuff out. That's what journaling is like for me. I want to journal. I do my best. I mean, I taught school for 12 years, but I want to do my best in my journal. Don't worry about punctuation. Don't worry about being capital. Don't even worry about grammar. Just get it out. Ask hard questions. Get out your questions. Say stuff that you wouldn't normally say. Do a memory. Oh, I remember even a memory that may not be finished. There were some conversations that Jenny and I had left undone that I still wanted to talk to her about the next time we went out to eat. We call that in counseling unfinished business. It's the conversation that's not wrapped up yet. And those aren't always sweet. Like, I just want to say one more thing about this. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, it's where there's a disagreement of some kind. You're like, I just wanted you to know, but now I don't get to tell you. But we can journal that. We can say, I can ask my grandmother questions in my journal of, what about? What about? And I remember when. We just give ourselves permission to be where we are emotionally. There are some websites that you can go to if you want to Google feelings wheel. And there's going to be lots of feelings words that show up there, because sad is not the only emotion for grievers, right? I mean, we feel a lot of things. How many of you have felt confusion? How many of you have felt ticked, mad, scared, confused? Maybe even this nagging sense that something's missing. It's just a sense of void that we feel. We need to be where we are emotionally and give ourselves permission, particularly if it's our first year, but to be fluid in family movement, to be fluid. And I've given you some prompts. The second page of the little set you filled out has some journal prompts on it. And if you need more journal prompts, if you'll get with me, I've got tons of websites for journal prompts. Do you see the one I'm talking about? The page? Okay, the page I'm talking about. One that I want to mention under emotional is I give myself permission to remember my special person. Within probably 3 months after Jenny died, I had a very special friend that gave me a candle. And it's not a little candle, it's a big candle. And she said, when my nephew died, and her nephew was 14 when he died, and she said, when he died, our family all got a candle. And when we remember him, and when we think about him, we light our candle. And so I told my husband about it, but I didn't tell my whole family about it. And that first year, every time we sit down for a family meal, I lit my candle because it meant something to me. To find something that that just was my signal of, oh, Jenny, I'm remembering you. I'm thinking of you. I want to be with you. A candle. Something else that I've seen people do are ornaments. How many of you pulling out your Christmas ornaments? I sit with people in my office and we talk about that a lot. Oh, I remember. One ornament this last year, Jenny gave me. She could barely even walk. She was born in August, so say, what would that be, 16 months old? Highland Church of Christ, Abilene, Texas. This little girl came waddling over to me with a little ornament that was a picture of her. This last year, I didn't have any trouble getting it out. I couldn't put it up. I mean, I put it on my tree. I couldn't put it back in my attic. So now it hangs in my kitchen. I wanted that ornament. I want to look at her. I want to be with her. I want to remember those days. Some of you have heard me say this, and this is just a great spot to say this, that I've made the very conscious, intentional decision that I absolutely do not want the pain of her death to overshadow the joy of her birth. I want to lean in to life. So ornaments, pictures. At Christmas, holidays, we can surround ourselves with pictures. Pull out those picture albums for those of you that have been so good to do that. I typically pull out a box. But, my pictures are all in boxes. And so it's a box to go through the pictures. And, I remember when. I remember this. We give ourselves permission to do it as long as we want or not to do it. Pictures. And for some of you, we talked about this briefly, but I still think it's important for those of you that want to give yourselves permission at your tables to have an empty chair. That's okay too. That's not the way our family has done it. We haven't opted to do that, but at any moment this year that I choose to do that, I will pull up an empty chair. I know a lot of families that do that. They don't want that chair empty. Empty chair. Also, I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight if we don't mention this one, sister friends. Give yourself permission to experience joy. Joy. And I'm very particular that I did not say happiness. Happiness is based on my externals. Joy is on my heart. Joy, from my perspective, in my belief system, says it is when the Spirit of the Lord fills me, I will have joy even when the lights go out around me. But joy, Dr. Brene Brown says, is the most foreboding of all emotions. It can feel very, very scary. And for some grievers, it can even feel like a sense of betrayal to feel joy. My own grief therapist told me this: it can feel really, really bad to be so sad. Somebody say truth. It can feel really, really bad when I start to feel glad. We feel like we're betraying. How could I feel joy again? You know how you can feel joy again? It's because your feet are walking on dirt. That's what we do. And because the Spirit of the Lord indwells us, we're feeling joy. We're experiencing joy. Give yourself permission. Brave is a word. It's my grief word. I use brave all the time. I want to be brave. I want to be brave. I want to be brave. I want to do this brave. A little different than shrink, because brave is when I recognize what I'm afraid of, my fear. I want to be brave enough to lay on the ground. I found a Kelly Ray Roberts quote that says this: I want to be brave in love, in faith, in grief, and in joy. I want to be brave in love, in faith, in grief, and in joy. Joy is foreboding. How many of us are saying, I hate to experience joy again because I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I hate to experience joy again because what if? Can't joy be so vulnerable for us? You talk about an emotion that makes you want to do this. Open your heart up. You can't feel joy when you're armored up, right? No joy when you're buckled in tight. But rather, when we open our hearts to joy, it can feel very vulnerable. We can be open to pain again. We give ourselves permission to feel that pain again. We give ourselves permission to be where we are, to show up where we are. The more self-aware I can be, this is why I believe this emotional piece is critical. The more self-aware I can be about my emotions, the better chance I have of not hurting or wounding another. The more self-aware I can be about my emotions. Now, what I mean by that, those of us that try to act happy when we're not, it's like the explosion occurs a few minutes into it because we can't maintain it. We bite somebody's head off, even if it's the dog. The more self-aware I can be, the better chance I have of treating other people like I value them, staying in my own value system, being who I am. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about under emotional, and this is from Dr. Brene Brown too, and I think this is imperative. We all have choices to make And I believe those of us walking a road of pain, this is never true for another group of people more than it is for us, whatever that pain may be. And the choice is, do I numb the pain or do I bring comfort to my soul through the pain? We all numb somehow. We need to know how we numb. Questions to ask when trying to figure out if you're numbing or self-caring. Will I feel good about this behavior tomorrow? Will it make me feel good tomorrow or only in this moment? Will this behavior create any feelings of guilt, shame, or regret in me? The idea is that true comfort may not even work as quickly or give me that fast relief, but it will enforce a more lasting self-care, and there won't be any regret attached to it. Grievers need to be really aware of making intentional decisions about, am I numbing or self-caring? Let me give you an example. This is kind of a cheesy example because I really don't even like Pringles, but I have a grandson that likes Pringles, and a couple of times they get left at my house. Are you familiar with what Pringles are? Those potato chips, and they all are the same shape. There was a day that I walked in my pantry, closed the door behind me. This was in a holiday season after the kids had all left, and I was sad that my house was quiet. And I really had this little quiet contest within myself of how many Pringles I could fit in my mouth at one time. And I finished that can of Pringles. And then I looked down, and there's chip crumbs all around me because who can see I can put a lot in my mouth at one time. My dentist thinks I have a tiny mouth. When I'm in a Pringles contest, that mouth can stretch out, let me tell you what. And so I went and got the dustbuster and cleaned up the whole mess. Now, I ask you, did that make me feel good about myself that I had done that? No, it did not. I felt horrible about me. I'm like, I don't even like Pringles. And they leave that slimy feel in your mouth. And then I felt like I needed to go brush my teeth and I couldn't get rid of them. I'm like, I don't even like them. What am I doing? But I thought it might make me feel better for a moment. But the same kind of movement involving food, what would bring comfort to my soul is to call friends the night my kids had left and go, you want to meet me at Joe T's for dinner? Both involve food. One is with me alone with the door closed, eating stuff I don't even like and overeating it at that, or hanging out with friends and maybe talking about grief and maybe not, but being with friends and sharing relationships. Numbing can be alcohol, which I need to tell you right here, I do have grievers that get in trouble with alcohol, people that didn't even drink before grief. Alcohol is a depressant. Alcohol might make you forget the pain for a little while. It does not sustain pain-free life because you wake up after the alcohol binge and the pain is there, if not even more. Drugs, prescription or not, oversleeping, undersleeping, overeating, undereating. Are you with me? Hyperactivity can be a number. Television can be a number. Social media can be a number. Anything that makes my pain go away, that I can lose track of time, but when it's over, I go, what was I doing? That doesn't make me feel better. It just made me forget it for a few moments. No, not at me. Are we together with that? Because I can talk a whole lot more about this if we don't understand it. Rather, I'd love for you to start a journal page. And this is what I've done in my own journal in 3 or 4, 5 or 6 journals since Jenny died. I'll just put a title at the top of a page. If I were you coming to this night, I would put a title, just self-care, comforting my soul. And if something popped in my mind, I would put it on my journal. Sometimes I've even kept it on the note page on my phone. So if I'm out shopping or whatever, and I'm like, I think that might help me. If I'm walking through pots and pans and I might go, I haven't made spaghetti in forever. I think that might be something that would comfort my soul, just to be in my kitchen and cook something that I know how to cook. And I might type that in. But are you with me? The difference, that's important that we understand that. Because one is going to make you feel a touchstone of connection and your humanity. The other is going to make you feel isolated and alone with deep regrets. Okay, wanted to make sure we covered numbing versus comforting your soul. And that research comes from Dr. Brené Brown too. Let's go to the R. And the R is relational. My favorite Brené Brown quote is this one. Love and belonging are the irreducible needs of every man, woman, and child. Without them, there is always pain and suffering. With them, there is sacred space. With love and belonging, there is sacred space. Now, belonging and fitting in are not the same. When I belong is when I know my heart is at home. When I'm trying to fit in is when I'm willing to cut off pieces of me to make you like me. But that makes me not like me. The example that I use with that is every other year now. It used to, we did every year, but every other year we go on a family vacation. And last time we went on a family vacation, like 18 months ago, we always take the same I'd have 10 Thomas Kincaid puzzles or so, and I'd take the same 2 or 3 all the time. And this last time, it was a puzzle we'd worked frequently. We were down to about 20 pieces left. Everybody was going to be heading out in the morning except us. I wanted the puzzle done before everybody left. So we're scrambling around at 1:30 in the morning putting this puzzle together. And there was a piece that I knew it went somewhere, but I couldn't get it to go there. I looked at my oldest grandson, who's 9, and I said, "Get the scissors." It's 1:30. I'm ready to go to bed. I want this puzzle finished. And I said, "But hold it, point down so you don't put out your eye." I remember my mom was saying that, point down, don't put out your eye. And my oldest son looked at me, he's like, "Mom, we've worked this puzzle 10 times. You know that is not right." And I thought, that is it. That's the example we need because it didn't belong there. And I was trying to get it to fit in. And how many of us do that with us? Get the scissors. Don't talk about your grief because you won't fit in. But rather, at a moment like this, I watched your faces, girlfriends. At a moment like this, some of you were holding sacred space with each other as we talked about our stuff. Because even though some of you have just met, you found a place for your heart to belong. Because we were talking about a pain that somebody was saying, "Me too." Love and belonging are the irreducible needs of every person, man, woman, and child. Only you alone, I think I opened with this tonight, you alone can do your own grief work, but you do not have to do it alone. We do it in connection with other people. Fears. I had no idea that grief felt so fearful. Fears are silenced in connection. I mean, how many of us can pull out chapter and verse to prove that? Fears are silenced when we walk arm in arm. Fears are silenced when we walk together. Fears are silenced when we say, "Let me help you. I want to be with you." We grieve because we love. All relationships, see if you agree with this, all relationships are risky business. All relationships are a risk. You have got to be positively certain you are willing to risk what you're risking. Grief is the price we pay to love. If we did not love our person that we all talked about tonight, there would be no grief. Truth? There wouldn't be grief if we didn't love them or care about them. But we grieve their death because we love them intensely. That's what we do. That's what we do. Ask another for help. Make the phone call. Be brave. I used to think that brave was just really, really strong. Now I don't say that anymore. I don't use it like that. To me, the definition of brave now, if I'm going to be brave about something, if I'm going to be courageous about something, it means I've got to know what I'm afraid of. Because bravery and courage are where fear and courage collide. By definition, you're not going to be courageous if you don't know what you were afraid of. Do you understand what I'm saying? If we don't recognize, I'm scared of that, I'm afraid of that, there can be no courage. It's where they show up together. For some of us, we're scared to death to ask for help. Why are we scared to ask for help? Help me with that one. Why are we scared to call somebody and ask for help? Pride. I don't want anybody to know I need help. Also, would you agree it's a risk? What if they say, nope? Because it's vulnerable to ask another for help. What if they say, I'd really like to, but I'm so busy. they don't know it took you 2 days, maybe 3 days to call and ask them for help. You know what I mean? It's risky business. It's risky business. Make the phone call. I've got to say this while we're on relationships. Between our death and funeral, there was another pastor that called my husband and said this. He had buried a daughter too. And he said, don't change your bio. You will always have 3 children. And I so appreciated that. But he said, people are going to say some really inappropriate things, but they're giving you the best they've got. Cover them with grace and mercy. Now, every time I say grace and mercy, I do it like this. I don't really know what that means. I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but this is my grace and mercy move. And when people say stupid things to me, you know, in my mind, I'm even thinking, and so one of my friends even gave me an umbrella, one of those clear umbrellas, you know, that goes like, she said, that's what I think of every time you do that. You're under the umbrella and it's not getting into you. But isn't it true? How many of us have said stupid stuff to somebody in grief? I have. I didn't mean to. It makes me nervous. It did. It made me nervous before I entered on the road myself. And sometimes I said some ridiculous things, but not to hurt them because I got nervous. Cover them with grace and mercy because they're giving you the best they've got. Grace and mercy is going to help us not have to do a whole lot of forgiveness work. They're giving you the best they've got. Sometimes I correct and sometimes I don't. My daughter was a singer, and sometimes if someone came up to me and said, oh, God just needed another angel in his choir, can't do that one. And sometimes I'm like, no, God is God and God needs nothing, and God did not need another angel in his choir, or he sure could have waited for a long time before he got Jenny's voice in his choir. God needs nothing. I don't believe that God is responsible for death. Somebody say truth. Do you agree with me with that? We live in a fallen world and death happens, but that's not the way that our earth began. That is not the way it started. Let's talk about the muskox for just a moment. When I taught first grade, every time I taught first grade, we did a unit on Alaska. We did a unit on Alaska because in Alaska, there's just some really crazy animals that are just fun to do. They're just fun. And the muskox is one of those. And one of the things I love about the muskox, there's other animals that do this, but none looks meaner than the muskox doing it. What the muskox does is when they sense attack, when they sense wolves, bears, whatever coming at them, they get their babies and they're wounded in the middle. And the daddy muskox, I'm assuming, because they're the biggest and the ugliest, I'm assuming they're the big daddies, they line up shoulder to shoulder all around in a circle around the wounded and the babies. And then the mamas come in and fill in between the shoulders so you can't see anything but big hairy muskox face. But the wounded and the babies are in the middle. Now, me, like you, I have spent a lot of time as a big ugly muskox on the outside with maybe younger women, my children, whatever, in the middle going, you can't have them. I'm protecting them. I'm going to lay down my life for them. You can't have them. But since February of 2010, I've been in the middle. And I've had friends that say, get behind me. Get behind me. Can't have her. Can't have her to the powers of darkness. I'm covering her. I'm covering her. That's what we do in relationships. When we are willing to text a friend or just call and say, having a really hard day, pray. Just pray. Or pray out loud with me. Or I need a verse. I need a word of truth. Remind me. And we stand shoulder to shoulder around each other. And sometimes that's other grievers around us. And sometimes it's people that don't know that road yet, but they're willing to cover us. That's what we do in relationships with each other. Let's go to the very last one, and it's the S, and it is spiritual. I wrote this quote in September after Jenny had died a year. So about 19 months after death, I wrote this quote. Death created for me. I need to set this quote up. I need to tell you what happened. I was on the road to speak in West Texas. I'm driving Highway 20, very familiar path for me. Drive Highway 20 all the time. All of a sudden, there was a a piece of ground, a lot, acreage that caught my eye about at Ranger Hill. You with me? For those of you that travel that. About at Ranger Hill, I looked over and it was just gray, ashen, huge crevices. It's where a wildfire had been. I wanted with everything in me to go pull over on that land and sit on it. But I know that path so well, and I was almost out of gas, and I knew how much gas I had to get to the nearest Love's, and I didn't have enough to do a U-turn and go sit on that land. So when I got to Love's, I pulled out my journal and I wrote this quote: "Death created for me a spiritual earthquake and left me sifting through the ash, the rubble, to find the remnants of my faith." Have you ever seen that piece on the news where a house is burned down and they're walking through the ash and they're going, "Oh, I remember. Oh, I remember. Look at this. Look at this one." And sometimes when our worlds get blown up, when our hearts feel like an explosion has happened, spiritually, we reclaim what we know. We reclaim what we know. Crisis creates transitions. Do you agree with that? Nod at me if you agree with that. Crisis bring us in to a transition point. Transition points lead us into super important moments of spiritual movement. Transitions are always about spiritual movement. More people want to know Jesus, more people want to know the Lord, more people seek Him out when they are in a transition of life than when things are steady. Our interest about spiritual things are heightened when we're in a transition point. In a transition, spiritual movement direction is critical to the rest of our time on earth. It's the direction that is critical. I'm trying to decide because I don't want to wound with my words, but I'm going to share a thought, and if it wounds, I've already prayed, and I will continue to pray that the comfort just supersedes my words. Someone asked me yesterday at this grief workshop that Rick and I did in Abilene, someone asked me yesterday, "Did you blame God?" And I thought about that for a moment. Did I blame God for Jenny's death? Because I know, as some of you know, with a movement of his eyelash, our people would still be here. With a movement of his pinky, do I blame God? What I found on the road of grief, to go along with this directional thought, I did not have a lot of energy. And I had to intentionally make the choice, am I going to worship or am I going to blame? Worship was a very familiar path for me. I wanted to worship. Blame was not going to get me what I wanted the rest of my life. And I do not believe, as I've already said, and I want to talk about for just a moment, I do not believe that we serve a God who is the author of death. I believe that death is from the powers of darkness. And one day, death will be defeated. Do you believe that? One day, death will be defeated. And so we have got to absolutely claim what we know is truth. What do you know is truth? A few years ago, before Jenny died, in fact, it was in the end of 2004, Rick and I went through a horrific time before we moved to Decatur with a church that my husband was on staff with before this. It was horrible, and just the details are just even hard to retell. And as I've told you, when you're a therapist, you're in therapy all the time. So it just so happened I was at Stacy's Furniture, Cliff's Restaurant in Stacy's Furniture, doing lunch with another therapist, and she began to ask me questions. And the answer to every question was, I don't know. Now, I have this real aversion to my name and the word boring being used in the same sentence. And so I was constantly changing it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I was just trying to vary it up a bit, but it was, I didn't know. And then all of a sudden, you know, we're right by South Lake, Texas, and I feel my throat begin to squeak. And if you know much about South Lake, Texas, people do not throw big fits in the parking lot in South Lake, Texas. And I was about to throw a really big fit because my throat was, I just knew there was just going to be this lay down the middle of the road cry. So I said, all right, it's been great, loved being with you. I'll call you sometime. It's been 10 years plus. I haven't called her yet, but I will call her one day maybe. I don't even know if I still have her number, but I said, I got to go and I'll see you later. Because she was asking me tons of questions. Where are you going to live? Where are you going to work? What are you going to do professionally? Is Rick still going to preach? Where are your kids going to come for Christmas this year? I don't know. And I got to my car and I said, God, I've just spent over an hour wrestling with what I don't know. Could you tell me something that I know? And at that moment, the Lord spoke into me. It was not a male voice, it was a settling in my soul. And he said, my daughter, I'm God no matter what happens to you. I will always be God. And you're coming to see me. And you will have a close circle of family and friends who will journey beside you. And outside of those three things, you just get to pretend like you know. Because we don't know anything outside of that. Do you agree with that? We don't know. We don't know. And so we want to be careful about our spiritual direction. We want grief to be a springboard that we can move in closer to the Lord and that we can ask hard questions. And in Josh's book, he asks hard questions and he gives us space to ask hard questions and questions there may or not be an answer to. Why? I don't ask why, and I'm not saying it's wrong for you to ask why, and all other people in my family ask why all the time. The reason I don't ask why is not a noble reason at all. The reason I don't ask why is I can't even picture getting to heaven and seeing the Lord face to face and him telling me anything about why and me going, oh, of course, now I get it. I just can't picture that happening. But I believe that the Lord is giving us exactly what we need to walk the road we've been called to walk. Is it hard? Oh, yeah. Is it going to be hard Thanksgiving and Christmas? Oh, yeah. But the Lord is not leaving us void of himself and to friends. Ephesians 1:3 says this. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is blessing us in the heavenly realms with every spiritual blessing in Christ. The blessing is the Lord's presence. The blessing is him giving us what we need on Thanksgiving Day. The blessing is him giving us the exact measure of himself that we need on Christmas Day. The blessing is invading with family and friends. The blessing is sitting at the table with family and friends. I remember early on, one of the things that people would say to me and maybe have said to you is, you're going to live through this. You're going to live through this. And every time I heard it, I wanted to say, but I didn't. I don't want to. Now, I was never suicidal. I just didn't want to live like this. I'm not suicidal. I wasn't then. I just didn't want this to be my life story. And here I am. This is it. And so we walk a road. We don't want to walk. But we walk it together, and we walk it arm in arm. And we're learning to carry the pain. There's a clip out of the movie called The Rabbit Hole. It took me years to watch the movie. I just watched the movie recently, heard about it right after Jenny's death. And in this movie, Nicole Kidman is an actress in this movie, and Nicole Kidman's 4-year-old son was killed. Her mom had buried her husband and an adult son. And so these two women are in the attic together putting away the boy's toys. And Nicole Kidman's character looks at her mom and says, Mom, does it ever get it easier? And her mom reflected for a moment and she said, you know, honey, I don't know if it gets easier, but you learn how to carry it. She said, it's like somebody sews a brick in your pocket and you can't get rid of the brick. But because you've learned to carry it, some days you forget the brick is there until you bump up against the cabinet. And you're like, oh yeah, the brick. Or you go to put your hand in your pocket and you're like, oh yeah, the brick. We remember. That's the road, sisters, that we're called to walk. We're called to carry the brick. And may we learn how to carry it. May we learn how to carry it. Let's hit a pause. We've got a couple of minutes left. Do you have a question that you want to put on the table tonight before we leave? Is there anything burning in you that you want to share? Okay. Yes.
I want to know how to help my mom.
How what?
How to help my mom.
How to help your mom. Okay, now explain to us your life loss.
My
Dad passed away. How to help her mom. Anybody got anything with that? Do you have ideas? What would help you? Isn't that what we want to do? We want to help other people. We want to walk arm in arm. We want to be there. We want to be there. It's Christy, right? I think that is so powerful. And do you know, for me, what I would say is to walk arm in arm with her and just be there. And let her talk as much as she wants to talk and don't feel like that she needs to protect you. And for you to talk about your dad too. You're not going to, the goal does not need to be, now see if you guys agree with me on this, I'm going out here with this. The goal is not to make the pain stop. The goal is not to do the pain alone. We're not going to make the pain stop for any of us in this room. That's not the goal of this workshop. That's not the goal of us being together. It's not even the goal of counseling if you came to my office with grief. The goal is that we do it together. That's a great question. Give me feedback. Do you agree with that answer? We're going to be together. We're going to show up.
Beverly, I couldn't have made it without my daughter.
Absolutely. She said, I could not have made it without my daughter, without a buddy showing up and being with. Absolutely. Able to bounce ideas. Yeah, that's good. Able to make it without our people. Without our people. Powerful. Okay, I want you to know that for some of us, this is the first time I've met you, and this will be a new relationship budding. If there is any way that I can help you with your road of grief in the days to come, I want to be there for you. I want to do it. If it's a phone call, if it's time together, we can meet at my office, we can meet in anywhere. I'm there to be with you, and so are other people in this room, because we're walking arm in arm together. You do not walk alone. We're with you. We're with you. Also, I'm starting in January. There will be 2 groups. Now, they aren't grief specific, but I believe they will be a piece of cake to do with grief as the backdrop. And they're Brene Brown groups, the quotes that one is called The Daring Way, and one is called Rising Strong. And if you are interested in being part of either one of those groups, I have morning and evening groups. Again, not everyone in the room will be walking the road of grief, but they will be an excellent place for you to use as a touchstone for walking the road of grief. I do need to close to be respectful, but I'm not at the end of my relationship with you. And so if there are questions that you have, I'm here to be with you. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Twitter, you can call the office. If you would like to start a grief group in January, we can do that too. I just need to know it. I just need to know that. And that's why we wanted your information tonight, just so we could pull you in with that. Tell you about is October 10th, Jesus Calling. I could not help but give you this. Love it. My very first year, November 1st, I met a friend for lunch, and I was feeling overwhelmed that day at lunch knowing November 1st was there. I'd taken the day off, wasn't in the counseling room that day, met her at Olive Garden and Grapevine, and she said, I brought a gift for you. And she gave me Jesus Calling. And she said, this morning it just so happens that I read October 10th. I'm way behind. And she said, I want you to have this Jesus Calling book, but I want you to read October 10th first. I was in terror over what the days ahead were going to be. Listen to this. Trust me enough to let things happen without striving to predict or control them. Relax, refresh yourself in the light of my everlasting love. My love light never dims, yet you are often unaware of my radiant presence. When you project yourself into the future, rehearsing what you will do or say, you're seeking to be self-sufficient, to be adequate without my help. This subtle sin, so common that it usually slips by unnoticed. The alternative is to live fully in the present, depending on me each moment, rather than fearing your inadequacy. Rejoice in my abundant supply. Train your mind to seek my help continually, even when you feel competent to handle something by yourself. Don't divide your life into things you can do by yourself and things that require my help. Instead, learn to rely on me in every situation. This discipline will enable you to enjoy life more and to face each day confidently. Do you see why that meant something to me? I love it. The other page that I've given you, it's just my favorite grief books. The two books on this that I would recommend you reading just like ASAP, of course, is my son Scarred Faith. And the other one is A Grace Disguised. His name is Jerry, not Terry. That's a typo. Jerry, not Terry. This man is a professor, I think in Oregon, maybe Washington, in one car wreck that he was into with his 4 children, his wife, and his mom. In one car wreck, he lost his mom, his wife, and his 4-year-old daughter, and left him on the side of the road with a 2-year-old with a compound fracture. And he goes on in this book to say, my life is a really good book with a really bad chapter. But it's a really good book. One chapter.
This is my second year of reading Jesus Calling.
Yes.
So it has helped me more than.
Isn't Jesus Calling so rich? Just to center up. Yeah. Just to center up. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to close with Jenny's life verse that is now mine. And it's Romans 15:13, and it says this: May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. Girls, it has been my blessing to be able to be with you tonight. What I really wish is that we were all at one table with chips and salsa and able to laugh some and be together and pass out Kleenexes together. But I've so prayed over this night, and I pray that maybe one thing has been said, maybe 2, maybe 3, that's been a touchstone for you, a lifeline for you to use in your grief journey to make it through the holidays. May the Lord richly bless you in the days to come. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of this night. Thank you.